feedback to the applicant. And there you go. So to the applicant and planning staff as we proceed. So this will be important in the overall project. Really excited to be discussing this tonight. I think mixed use infill development is important, particularly in this area, one that makes better use of the space than the current surface parking and low-rise commercial. Bank Street south of Billings Bridge really is becoming more of a traditional main street as we proceed, much like it is north of Billings Bridge. So those ACT-grade commercial offerings will be an important aspect of achieving a traditional Main Street type of feel with active frontages. And I know some members of the community have reached out because they love the existing tenants here. I'm one of those as well. I go to Ruby's Inn all the time. So I know some of these commercial tenants could return after the development is complete. As I understand it, the applicant can also speak to whether displacement is unavoidable here, given the likely phased nature of a potential infill development here. With the Walkley LRT station opening just a stone's throw away from this site and a new bike lanes, along with wider sidewalks and traffic coming to this entire stretch of Bank Street, the calming of traffic, there's going to be a lot to look forward to in this area in the years to come. I'm going to cede the floor now to other councillors to say a few words if they wish before I throw it back to Miles to review the agenda and carry us forward. So Councillor Brockington, did you want to make some comments?
Well, thanks so much, Councillor Menard, and good evening, everyone. Just very briefly, as the councillor literally across the street, meters away from this property, there's significant interest in this development proposal. If you're like me and a Riverside Park boy, there's some sentimental value. The old IGA and shops, the Ruby Inn, of course, is mentioned. Value Village is a favorite of my oldest daughter, but certainly as time evolves, so do properties and developments. And I know that Riverward residents are very interested to learn more about the development, and that's why we're here tonight, and to work in concert to see councillors working together for the betterment of our community. That's what we're committed to. We serve the public and hope that the public feedback will be good both tonight and following tonight. So all that to say, I'm here to listen and to learn more and to make sure Riverward is well represented. Thanks, Councillor.
Thanks so much, Councillor Brockington. Councillor Bradley?
Yeah, thank you so much, Councillor Menard, and thank you to everyone for coming out tonight, and thank you to your office for organizing and inviting myself and Councillor Brockington and Councillor Carr's office to participate. So this application falls just outside of Gloucester Southgate Ward, but like Councillor Brockington said, many residents in my community traverse this corridor all the time and visit those businesses there. So there's a lot of interest in Gloucester Southgate Ward about this application. So we're all looking forward to learning more. And I think we're seeing this in many areas, including our community with South Keys, these sort of underutilized strip malls as they were and how they're changing. So excited to learn from this process to see how it could maybe be replicated in other areas in our community. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much for those comments. I'll pass it now over to Miles to chair the meeting and take us forward from here. Miles.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. So look, the agenda is pretty straightforward. We're going to go to the applicant presentation next. And then we're going to hear from just initial comments from our local community association that's proximate to this site, the Heron Park Community Association, before opening it up to everyone for an open floor question and answer and comment period. If you want to participate in that Q&A and comment period, we'll ask you to use the raised hand function. If you're having trouble using the raised hand function, you can flag it for us in the chat, and I will add you to the speakers list that way. But otherwise, please use the raised hand function. We'll revisit this when we get to that portion of the evening. But without further ado, and by the way, folks, we're looking to wrap up 9 p.m. latest today. We'll see how late things go, but we'll have a hard stop if it does get close to then. So just be cognizant of that during the open floor period. So yes, I'm going to throw over to Miguel now from the applicant team to introduce the application and to introduce the team.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks, Doug. Doug will be sharing the screen on our behalf. My name is Miguel Tremblay. I'm a partner at Foten Planning and Urban Design. We are a land use planning firm, and we're assisting BGO with the applications. just to keep things moving, what I'll do is I'm going to introduce the entire team. Most of them are on the screen. If you could just raise your hand and acknowledge. And then what I'll do is I'll tip my hand a little bit as to how we intend to manage the presentation for you this evening. So to start off, I am joined here by Brad Keiko. He's the Managing Director and Head of Canadian Development for BGO. He's joined by Griffin Brockman, who's a manager at BGO. I'm also joined by Paul Black. He's an associate at FOTEN and the lead on the FOTEN file. I'm here with Barry Hoban, founding principal at Barry Hoban Architects, along with Doug Vandenham, who's an associate, and will be probably doing the lion's share of the presentation for the building design. And lastly, I'm joined by Andrew Hart from CGH, and they're the transportation consultants. You should know that when applications come forward, there are other consultants that contribute to the design and prepare supporting materials. We don't typically bring them. For instance, there's a site servicing consultant, there's an environmental consultant, geotech. They all contribute in different ways. Our experience is during these public meetings, they rarely field questions. Having said that, if you do have some questions related to soils and things like that, if we have the information, I suggest that maybe we could respond to those questions through the counselor's office and get that information to you. But we typically don't bring them with us. As a starting point, I'm going to ask Brad and Griffin to introduce BGO. Many of you in your community may not know that they have made substantial investments in Ottawa. We thought this would be an appropriate time to bring them on and introduce the company, maybe talk about their portfolio and their design approach. And then immediately after that, I will provide an overview of the applicable policies. I'm going to go, it'll be 2-3 slides. It won't be that involved. It's usually not the most exciting part of our presentation. But in light of the fact, as the councillor mentioned, that staff is not here, I'm going to spend a little bit of time on process to orient everybody as to where we are in the development approvals process. And then I'll try to summarize very quickly the applications. So Brad, I don't know if you want to take a moment and Doug advance the presentation a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Miguel, thank you very much. Pardon me. Miles, thank you to you and your team for setting this up. And by extension, we have the very unique privilege of developing, been doing this for 30 years, the first proposal ever at the formal confluence of 3 ward boundaries and informally 4. So I would like to thank Councillors Menard, Brockington, Bradley, and Carr for their participation and their interest in the program as we go forward. My name is Brad Keiko. I'm the Managing Director and Head of Canadian Development. Personally, I have 29 years of experience in the development field, and I'm here on behalf of our fund, Sun Life, to, with our team, present to you today an early proposal for redevelopment of the lands at this intersection. I just wanted to reiterate a couple of points about who we are. We are a highly experienced, vertically integrated team that operates across the country. Within the overall program, that is a global real estate entity. We are owned by Sun Life. The B in BGO stands for Bentall, tracks back to Canadian roots, the original Bentall family out of Vancouver, who give us the ability to state that we have over 100 years of experience in development, design, and construction. Strength in execution, we demonstrate performance across multifamily, rental, retail, office, industrial, healthcare, and mixed use. Primary focus in our current portfolio is industrial and the delivery of new communities anchored by purpose-built rental. We have extensive experience from project inception to completion. And we, again, operate on behalf of 3 funds, Sun Life, Prime, and Value Add. As I mentioned earlier, this particular asset today is currently owned by Sun Life. We have extensive experience in affordable housing across many current initiatives. And the size of our portfolio, although quite malleable, we're constantly rotating new opportunities in and completing projects and rotating those out. Current estimate is we're in the neighborhood of around $8 billion in anticipated costs, approximately 8,000 residential units, and we're currently active across Canada in 10 jurisdictions. Next slide, please. We have a very, very, I hope you would agree by the time we get deeper into this process, good reputation of striving to seek a win-win-win for all stakeholders. We are not merchant builders. We are folks that will strive to understand what is important in each jurisdiction that we own and develop assets. And in this particular instance to date, we've identified the City of Ottawa, staff, Capital Ward, bounding wards, the surrounding community, neighbors, community associations, and et cetera. Hopefully many of you, or if not all of you, are represented here tonight, as well as the interests of our funds. It's the confluence of the common elements between those involved that is going to get us to a successful outcome here. Next slide, please. Just in terms of an Ottawa investment, we purchased 395 terminal, I believe, about midway through the pandemic. We've owned 100 Murray for quite some time, and we're invested in 50 O'Connor. All told, we are approximately 1.25 million square feet in terms of square footage, and about $500 million in terms of a current investment as are committed across our funds in the Ottawa market. Just the statistic, focusing on the statistic at 1.25 million square feet, if we are successful with the initiative that we are going to present to you this evening, our investment would double in terms of that statistic. So we believe in Ottawa firmly, as you can see today, and we see amazing things for Ottawa as we move forward. Next slide, please. The projects represented on this particular slide are recent development initiatives. By no means are they exactly what you would see boots on the ground in Ottawa as part of this program, but they give you a sense of some of our more recent purpose-built rental initiatives. 2 St. Thomas is a project that we developed and converted to IPP in 2018. Viridian in Vancouver is more of a bespoke neighborhood type addition that was developed over the past 7 years and was delivered to market in 2021. The project in the upper right-hand corner, Novus, was delivered in 2022. And across the street from it at 45 Strachan, we are pouring, I think, the 27th or the 28th slab. That building is under construction. And those 2 buildings are integral additions to the community in Liberty Village at Ordnance Triangle here in Toronto. Next slide, please. This is just a slide high level to confirm that BGO globally has a very, very strong belief in sustainability. We've joined NZAM, the Net Zero Asset Managers Initiative, with the goal of contributing support or committing support to net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 or ideally sooner. So we have an amazing initiative and are held to pretty strict rules to consider zero carbon or zero carbon ready as a key component of all of our future developments. That's it for my introduction. And from here, I'll turn it over to Miguel and to Barry Hoban. Thank you very much.
Brad. Doug, if you want to just go to the next slide. So maybe here I'll fulfill a little bit of what oftentimes the city planner would do, but again, because we are quite early in the process, they're not joining us at this early stage. Councillor Menard alluded to the fact that we've now inherited through legislative changes by the province a new approval process. This approval process is very timeline sensitive, so it is now very front loaded. And the reason the pre-consultation and study development bubble is much larger is a lot of the review and back and forth with the city and other agencies is very much front loaded, and you should expect that now takes several months before an application is deemed acceptable to submit and go through the application submission stage and then the review. We are really at the onset of this. We've been fortunate to have one consultation meeting with staff. There will be several others in order to refine the applications, refine the study requirements. If you remember, I gave you an inventory of all the studies that we expect to do. So there is very much of an iterative process there. It does allow us, and maybe just in anticipation of a question or two, it does allow us to consult with other agencies. So we have reached out to the Airport Authority and NAVCAN. I'm sure somebody will raise the issue, and we have had early discussions in terms of the building heights, and are the is the airport and NAVCAN comfortable with those heights? They've said they are generally, or at least enough for us to proceed with the planning applications. You'll notice you're at the front end here. This is, as the councillor mentioned, this is not a required public meeting, but I think it's a required public meeting, and that it's required for the process. It's desired. This provides an opportunity for people to provide early input into the concept, because the concept that Doug is going to share with you, don't be disappointed. There's not a lot of architecture to it, because it is still very much at the conceptual level. But this is the right opportunity to seek direction on access, heights, density, park, all of those things. You'll notice that there's a bubble there, UDRP. So we are, I think, within the week or so, going to attend a consultation with the city's urban design review panel. That's a panel made up of about 10 architects that provide direction on behalf of the city related to urban design and architectural. If you follow the arrows along, once we submit, the city would have about 120 days to review the applications. That's why everything is so front loaded, but there will be opportunities for additional public consultation through that process. The Planning and Housing Committee meeting makes recommendations to City Council. Ultimately, City Council approves applications, but you will have an opportunity to speak at Planning and Housing Committee or submit materials. That is the statutory public meeting. That is the required public meeting in the approval process. And then the recommendation goes to City Council, and then there's a notice of decision, and everybody involved will get a copy of that, anybody who requests that. And there are rights of appeal, I should advise you, to the Ontario Land Tribunal. So truly the intent here is to, well, first and foremost, share information, although preliminary, about the concept, and provide everyone an equal opportunity to provide comments that may guide us, guide staff, guide your councillors. We think this is probably the best format to do that, because it allows us to share the information to quite a large number of people. At times, we may just be taking notes and taking in your comments. But if there's opportunities to respond to some of your questions, we certainly will. Next slide, if you don't mind, Doug. So what I'll do very quickly is I'll walk you through the policy context. So any development applications are subject to a range of policy and regulatory documents. I'll try to give you an overview in the next 3 slides. In addition to provincial recommendations and direction through various documents, the most important municipal document is the official plan. An official plan is a 20-year guiding vision for how the city should grow. It sets aside land uses, like it says residential will go here, commercial and employment will go here, park space will go here. It assigns building heights along certain corridors, and it also guides infrastructure investments for the city. For instance, transit systems, typically as a result of official plan policies, will follow very closely areas that are well suited for greater residential or employment densities. Our current version of the official plan was approved in November 2022. And the bold purple lines, the biggest lines, are defined and designated as Main Street corridors. The smaller lines are minor corridors, and they're subject to less building height, but all of the bold lines like Walkley and Bank Street, and if you think further to, you know, Woodruff and Baseline and Montreal Road and Innes Road in the east, they are all anticipated to strategically accommodate greater density and greater building heights. Those bold lines in that designation permits buildings of up to 40 stories. And I know that may be jarring to someone that hasn't been following the new official plan. But there are also expectations that those building heights along those corridors will have a certain amount of transition. That transition refers to stepping down of the buildings, using podiums, building setbacks, looking at angular planes, orientation of the buildings and the balconies. There's all sorts of design tools to try to achieve that transition. But the OP does recognize that these properties along these corridors, and you know, Councillor Bradley alluded to this as well, they're often deeper, older shopping center properties that are intended to look and function differently than the low-rise neighborhoods that they abut. And they're intended to be characterized by taller buildings and higher density than those abutting areas. These lines are very strategic because they follow the transit corridor. So the blue lines, or the blue dots rather, the red dots are LRT stations, O-train stations, and we are about 220, 230 meters from that transit station. So very much a target area for intensification for the city. Next slide, if you will, Doug. I mentioned that there are layers of policy. So there are other policies that apply to the site, including the Bank Street secondary plan and the supporting community design plan. Now, these are more localized area-specific policies. They're often at a finer grain, and they support the official plan. The inconvenience, though, is that they are often out of step with official plans because the official plan is updated every 5 years, and it articulates the new city vision. These older documents, this one's from 2012, although it was carried over into the new official plan, doesn't fully recognize the policy direction of the new OP. If you remember what I shared with you, the heights here are more in the 40-story range. So this property is within node 3. There's 3 nodes along the Bank Street corridor, including Billings Bridge and South Keys. And right now, that older document supports heights of about 16 stories and a lower FSI. A floor space index is a calculation of density. So the application, there's going to be 2 applications that you're going to see that we're going to walk you through this evening. The first one is there's going to be an official plan amendment to change the Bank Street South secondary plan from 16 stories to the heights that are being proposed and supported in the official plan for 4 buildings of 40 stories, 30 stories, 25, and 24 stories. And next slide, Doug, if you don't mind. So the last layer of regulations now is there is existing zoning. Like the zoning on this property, truly anticipated large format retail. You'll notice that the corridor is already defined as that. It's mostly aging shopping centers as you walk down south to South Key Shopping Center. The zoning reflects what is in the current secondary plan, which again is heights lower than what are anticipated in the official plan. There's going to be a second application to amend the existing zoning on the property to reflect, again, the heights that are being proposed. Usually that's expressed through a schedule, if you've seen other applications. Not necessarily a comparable, but maybe helpful for some in this community that might have been involved with the applications at Bank and Riverside. There was very comparable applications for an amendment to the secondary plan to increase the heights. I believe it was 29 and 27 stories there, and revise the FSI. And then that property inherited through an approval from council, a very detailed schedule prescribing building setbacks, podium heights, building heights, and all those things. So all of that certainty is provided through the zoning amendment, which is the second application that that we're submitting this evening. So I think with that, I could probably finish up and pass off to Doug, who's going to walk you through a little bit of the context and the design approach.
Thank you very much, Miguel. I'm Doug Vandenham from Home and Architecture. I've been working on this file now for several months, and I'm just going to take you through where we are at currently in terms of the design, and then also talk about some of the thinking behind the design approach and why this project at this location. So first of all, I'm going to start off with a pretty broad view, just looking at the overall context. So within the city of Ottawa, and most of you are well aware of where this site is within the city, but it's just important, I think, to make note that we used to be in an area that is probably on the periphery of what we consider the city. The city's grown, obviously, it's expanded quite a bit, and this is becoming a little bit more of a central location. With the addition of the new public transit line that runs, Trillium line running down this line right here, there's improved connectivity to a bunch of key locations. For example, we're about 7 kilometers from downtown, 3 kilometers from Carleton University, 4 kilometers from the Ottawa Hospital, and about 6 kilometers south to the airport. Looking at a little bit closer at the site, you can see that we're located at the northwest corner of Bank and Walkley intersection. That's a site currently occupied by a single floor commercial plaza with the few different uses in there, the Value Village, the famous egg rolls, and a few other small retailers. This site is kind of part of the commercial industrial strip that is Bank Street. A lot of it was developed roughly between 1960 and 1975 and hasn't really changed substantially since then, other than some kind of updating of those current uses, like the new car dealership across the street. We're on the boundary, though, of a 1960s residential neighborhood, a small residential enclave built in the mid-2000s. And then, of course, new development that's responding to the currently being constructed O-train stations, so new apartment buildings on a non-private. Some of the other things, of course, that really make this an interesting site and one that's very prime for redevelopment, proximity to green space corridors, both the Airport Parkway corridor and the recreational pathways that follow along that. Also fairly close proximity to existing recreation centers and elementary schools, and then just off the slide, some other schools as well, elementary schools as well. So as I talked about a little bit before, the site's located in a kind of a 1960s commercial strip. It's really kind of characterized by surface parking, single floor retail. And this is the kind of site that under the new official plan, the city is really targeting to redevelop into mixed use, higher density. And along with that comes kind of a reshaping or rethinking of those street edges from being primarily kind of car-oriented thoroughfares to being more accommodated to walking, cycling, as well as those car uses, and with more animation occurring right at the street edge as opposed to behind parking lot spaces. Again, just identifying on this map here our relationship to those existing low-rise neighborhoods, both on the northwest side and the southeast side. Looking at that kind of from the street level, these views really actually capture kind of the character of the street today. And as of probably the end of this decade, roughly 2028, this area will start to see a transformation as part of the Bank Street reconstruction. And as part of that, the character of this street's going to change greatly to be something that's a little bit more what you'd expect to find in an evolving urban environment. So looking at some of that new development towards this transit station, looking basically, from a non-private looking east up Walkley Avenue. The site is right here. So I'm standing in this view roughly just a little bit east of the entrance to the transit station. You can see across the intersection, we're about 200 meters from the transit station entrance to the edge of the development site. And then standing on Bank Street, south of the site, looking past the shoppers, you can just barely see the site because it kind of, Bank Street rises up, the site drops down. So there's a bit of a grade change in there. And then a few views kind of capturing the totally different characteristic of what's happening towards the northeast of that site. So the townhomes that are part of this little pocket right here that's immediately across the street from the transit station, single family homes that are part of the community to the northwest. Some of that new development happening on a non-private, so the hotel from a few years ago, and then the 3 new apartment buildings, and then a picture of that greenway corridor that, these are the kind of the physical characteristics that shape the site. Looking at the site, one of the things I think that's most notable here is that the existing grade changes from the site, about 4.5 meters from this point where I'm standing in this photo at the bottom corner here, to the west corner towards the transit station is about 4.5 meters. And what that has resulted in is that there's a really hard kind of edge along Bank Street and Walkley, and only limited points of access into the site. So one of the things that we'll try to address as part of this redevelopment is to create a more porous site, and one that has a better address and face onto Bank Street and onto Walkley. Just a quick plan look at the existing site. So building and surface parking, that really is what defines it. There's a few kind of access points, driveways at the northeast, driveway at the southwest, kind of a little limited access here for right in from Walkley Road. But really not a lot of green space, not a lot of pedestrian realm within that site. So now the first glimpse of where we're going. As both Brad and Miguel talked about, we're very early on in the design stages for this project. And I think means it's at a really good point to bring forward for a public consultation. Right now, there's a lot of room for information we get back in these consultations to shape how this development plays out, particularly in some of the details on how we deal with things like the open space in the middle of the development, access from the streets through into the development, how we articulate the building forms in terms of massing and stepping. And so your comments at these public consultations help guide us and help provide us information on how the community perceives these things and help shape how we move forward. So as Miguel talked about, there's a group of 4 buildings, the tallest one, which we've located furthest away from the low-rise residential, and at the key intersection of Bank and Walkley is 40 stories. We've got a building along Walkley closest to the transit station that we have at 30 stories. We have a building that kind of is the center of the site facing Bank Street to 24, and then a building kind of following the north edge of the site that has a section at 25, and then it steps down to a podium that's 6 stories, and then kind of a little annex piece on top. And that creates kind of a transition line to the adjacent townhomes on Glenview. The other thing that does, of course, is we're trying to protect potential for overlook from balconies and outdoor spaces onto these townhomes. One of the big moves that we think is important on this development is that because we're transforming a commercial kind of strip to somewhere that we want to see a bunch of people living, and we want to create a community in, we've created, as part of the proposal, a large open space that falls into the middle of this. This open space creates breathing room for the buildings. It creates kind of a buffer space from the existing residential to the west to our development, and provides kind of a focal point and a draw that, tells people that, yes, this is going to be, its own little community. You're going to have space to kind of get outside. You're going to see green, and you're going to have space that you're looking out towards. Kind of looking at that from the plan, you can see the 4 buildings. So the tallest one right here, southwest corner, the second tallest one closest to the transit station, which is about 200 meters off the bottom of this slide. Right here is 30 stories, and the 24-story one, and then the stepping one to the north. We're looking at introducing a new public street that goes through the site and kind of links from Bank Street to Walkley. We intend this to be a very low speed street. This is a neighborhood street or a local street. It's not designed to be a cut through from Bank Street to Walkley. And then that also helps to reinforce, we've recognized there's a pedestrian desire line coming from Alta Vista, cutting through the site to get to the transit station, and just reinforces the opportunity for pedestrian traffic to move through the site. Also in that redevelopment, we'll break down that walled edge that happens on Bank Street and Walkley and create opportunities to enter into the site as a pedestrian kind of from the intersection and from various midpoints on the site. Like I said earlier, we're really early in the development of this. All of this is subject to change and to kind of reflection on our part based on what sort of feedback we receive tonight and going forward in the application process. Just looking at that in comparison, a few little key points I want to bring up here. Number one is that existing building is about 46,000 square feet. Our building area coverage, as we propose it, only increases that by about 10,000 square feet. But we go from about 0 homes near transit on this site to being able to provide homes for 1,100 to 1,200 residents. Likewise, we go from 218 surface parking spots down to about 43 surface parking spots, and we'll accommodate most of our parking for the facility below grade, allowing us to basically go from about 1.4% of the site being green space to having green area in the range of 32 to 36% of the site overall. So a much greener, much more pedestrian-friendly site results of this, as well as being able to provide, countless new homes for new residents in the neighborhood. For Hoban Architecture, this is a type of project that we've been working on increasingly more often. Some of the earliest redevelopments, this type we did Lansdowne Park. I'm sure you're familiar with this, being just 3 kilometers north of your neighborhood. And then another recent one that's really the very similar type of project where we're redeveloping an existing shopping mall site at City Park to be a group of residential buildings. 2 are currently constructed. There's plans for 2 more, and this is immediately adjacent to Blair Transit Station. And then a couple proposed projects, similarly, one on Carling Avenue, where we're looking at 6 buildings on an existing retail site and along the future bus rapid transit line at Carling, and another development immediately adjacent to Gladstone Station. And with that, I will turn it over to Andrew to talk about some of the upcoming changes and transportation items around the site.
Thanks, Doug. Yeah, I'm Andrew Hart from CJ's Transportation. So I spent my entire career in Ottawa doing city and development related projects, but predominantly development related projects these days. What we wanted to highlight on the transportation side is just kind of the same things Doug pointed out a little bit earlier. Major arterial roads, transit station. Like I'm not going to call it a hub because it has a specific definition in the policy, but it's almost that hub type situation where you have major infrastructure coming to a point and to provide that access to and from this site. One of the benefits of this area actually, and is in the top right corner of the slide, is Bank Street's being redone to the north. This area is targeted for around 2028 or just beyond. The Trillium line is opening the Walkley station this spring or early summer. Walkley Road stuff to the west of this site, there's a lot of improvements going along Walkley McCarthy Road, connecting to Airport Parkway and the new transit station, as well as Airport Parkway. So I will note it's a little bit optimistic the dates I have on the Airport Parkway, but I know that the delay on it was 2 years after LRT and everything. So that's kind of the earliest dates there. But all this is really to highlight this is an opportunity for this area, and especially this corner, is that there is so much infrastructure and investment from the city going in here to help change the nature and how you can actually travel to and from this site. So there's a lot of opportunity here, but it also defines how we have to connect to the transportation network and how we have to target this site to meet different styles of travel, not car oriented anymore. It's going to give that framework on the bottom corner kind of shows the cross section generally of Bank Street and how it's being transformed, divided roadway with bus priority measures in some parts, and then cycling and pedestrian features separated on both sides. Within our process, we've done our first touch point with the city. So they've reviewed our existing conditions report and provided feedback. One thing I think is actually kind of somewhat, there might be some disbelief here, but it is actually interesting to see the modal share targets the city has for these types of areas. They're generally around like a 65% transit mode share for developments close to a transit station. So we've actually proposed a little bit lower there. We don't think we can quite get that high right off the bat. That might be an evolution, well into the future, but not maybe achievable on day one. But even at that, the removal of the existing site has a very comparable expected trip generation to what is existing today. So it's kind of an interesting situation that it's probably very similar on an auto impact to the area, although this would generate much more transit, many more walking and cycling trips for the area. So it's something that we're working our way through with the city, but I just wanted to highlight that it's kind of I find it interesting because it's my realm, but it's not something that people usually think about as removing a previous site takes some trips away, and then there is a plus minus you have to do to equate that at the end of the day. So it is something we'll explore and will be documented in our reports going forward. So I think that covers everything. Doug, I can pass it back to you.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm just going to take us over to the last slide that we had in the deck, and this is the one that takes us into the question phase. I believe we have the CA coming forward with questions initially, and then we will switch over to an open floor for discussion. If during the questions we need to, we'll flip back to applicable slides just to answer them. But I think this one here leaves us in a good spot to lead off those questions, in that we're really looking at what we have today and the direction that we're trying to take this site in. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Doug. So look, we're going to head into comments and questions now. Before I head into the open floor, I'm going to invite the representatives from our local our local community association who deal with planning files to provide some brief remarks to get us started. I know we have Linda and Susan from Heron Park Community Association on the call. So if either of you would like to provide some initial comments now, please do raise your hand and I will ask you to unmute. I suspect there are other community association representatives on the line tonight as well. We'd also love to hear from you. Just feel free to introduce yourself when you are speaking. And okay, we're going to go to Linda first. When we do go into the open floor, I'm going to just transition to Edward after that. I want folks to know we will be prioritizing new speakers. So if you've spoken already and you're back in queue, I won't be going back to you until we've heard from new speakers. I also want you to know off the top that we want a collegial discussion. Absolutely no ad hominem remarks tonight. We're trying to have a productive dialogue here, and we want to have that constructive and critical feedback and all the questions you have. So look, I'm going to throw to Linda now, and then we'll transition into the open floor. Linda, I'm going to ask
Thank you very much.
There you go. Perfect.
Okay, thank you very much to all the presenters. Lots of things to really admire about the site. about the plan presented. Really like the central courtyard idea and the consideration for pedestrian traffic through the area to the transit stations. I note the 1,100 residents, but there was no mention of the number of units. And as part of that, the unit measure, I'd like to also know how many of the units are classified as bachelor, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and the unicorn of rental units, the 3-bedroom. So if you have any information on that, that would be, I think, really important. In addition to that, the real challenge with the quote housing crisis is really an affordability crisis. Is there any thoughts and or consideration around the affordability and whether or not there'll be some portion of the stock set aside for as designated affordable housing? What else? I also was very impressed by the track record of zero carbon and LEED buildings. Will this building also meet those standards? I'm hopeful that they will. We're happy about the reduction in surface parking, of course. But we do know that at least our experience has certainly shown that people still buy cars and use them for the weekend and for other non-commuting purposes. So that's just a reality of our lives, even though this is supposed to be not a car-focused development, and we applaud that. But we have experienced overflow parking in our neighborhoods. So then there isn't a lot of overflow parking around in this area. So I'm concerned about the townhouse, the few visitor parking spots in the townhouse area. I commend you for watching the shadows on and the overlook over on the townhouse units. Very much appreciate that and concern for their privacy and their use of their green space. I think I'll stop there. So really interested in the size of the units, the number of family-sized units. You mentioned that there are schools. There are quite a number of schools within Heron Park, but also in Alta Vista and on the other side of Walkley. There's another. There are some French schools there that actually where this neighborhood is in the catchment for. Yes, so that's it for me.
Thanks so much, Linda. To the applicant team, are you able to respond?
Well, I can maybe just start real quick though by reminding everyone that the drawings are very conceptual. You'll notice, they are purely just massing drawings. It will be difficult at the onset now to start assigning, those kind of areas to each of those units. I did want to just let you know that the 1,100 to 1,200 are actually units, not people. So, apartments. Okay. And maybe one last thing, Linda, one of the reasons it's a public street that's being proposed is the intent is that that's actually not a courtyard, but a municipal park. It would be conveyed to the city. But the city has certain expectations for public road frontage. So anyways, that's one of the driving factors to the public road at this point. And then we've inherited the public road as well through the design documents. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
That's great. So we can maybe even see play structures at some point.
Okay, is that it from the applicant response? Assuming yes.
I would just add, Miles, just on behalf of Sun Life, who is the fund who owns this asset. Linda, thanks for your inquiry with respect to affordable housing and unit mix. It's really too early to commit to anything at this point in the process. We're going through a process where we fact find and take comments like the ones that you've provided tonight. we'll take them away and give due consideration to them. I would just say in closing that Sun Life has an amazing track record for delivering on both attainable and affordable housing, and we can expect to see some component of both woven into this overall program.
Thanks for that, Brad. As you know, our office has also emphasized that as a priority for us for not just affordable housing, but a non-market affordable component if possible. Look, we're going to go to the public Q&A list now. I have Edward as the first, who's been holding the first speaker slot for quite some time. So Edward, I'm going to go ask you to unmute, so go ahead and do so.
Hi, Miles. Thanks for this opportunity. Can you hear me? Just to make sure.
We can hear you. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks, Miles. I wrote down a list of many things I wanted to ask about, but I'm just going to focus on the one thing that actually is important to me and important to I think basically everyone. But my understanding is these are rental units. This will be a building not subject to any type of rent control. So basically, we'll end up. Sun Life is in the business of making money, and without any commitment to any type of affordable housing for anyone, this is just. This would turn into a joke. So I guess I just wanted to mention that. So if there's no commitment at all to any type of affordable housing for the residents here, then Sun Life wants to make money, then that's fine. Everyone wants to make money, but this is not something I would obviously be happy with. So I just wanted to mention that. What I know is concerned, but it kind of did cover what was mentioned earlier, is if this would be a public park, that'd be great. And I'm looking for some type of guarantee, because I could just see, Sun Life put a giant fence around it and not allow access. And I also have some concerns about the parking. With this many units here and people moving in and out, while I don't live anywhere near that little rental or the houses that are currently there, the on-street parking would just be a total disaster for all the residents that live near there. I agree with essentially everything the previous speaker, Linda, said. So thank you for all your work and attention to this. And yeah, that's just what I wanted to talk about, because we got a lot going on in this city, especially when it comes to the affordability crisis. Record usage of the food bank, record homeless camps around even where I live, and to put up what seems to be some sort of luxury rental unit with absolutely no rent control or no commitment, to me is just complete nonsense, especially during this current affordability crisis. That's all I really wanted to say. It's more of a comment, but if there's no guarantee, or I guess my question is, when can we get a guarantee for affordability is my question. Thank you.
Miles, okay, if I respond to that?
Please go ahead, Brad.
Thank you, Edward. We just can't get into the specifics at this time. It's simply too early in the process, but I can say to you that it is, again, I'll reiterate, a priority of Sun Life to address both attainable housing and affordable housing. So when we are ready, we'll be sure to come back to you with something meaningful with respect to that particular point. Thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. That's appreciated. And for the current residents there that are operating the retail front, it would be a shame to have them just disappear out of the community completely. I'm sure some people there agree. So a commitment to allowing some of the residents to stay would also be a consideration I would hope you would make, because nothing like getting priced out of your own area. So I'd like that to be a consideration as well. Thank you.
Sorry, Edward, just to clarify, I'm hearing that comment properly. Do you mean some of the retailers, not the residents?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
some of the stores that are currently there. Yeah, because
Thanks
I would imagine that there would be storefronts on the bottom of these large buildings. Thank you.
Thanks, Edward. Did you have anything else to add there, Brad, before we move on?
No, just wanted to clarify he meant retail. Thank you, Miles.
Yeah, no worries. And Edward, it's a priority for us as well. We'll be hoping to get a commitment here to that end. You're right, rent control's been gone since 2018. Part of the why all the new supply that's coming to Ottawa is not affordable. So thank you for making those points. Terry, I see you next on my list. I'm going to ask you to unmute, okay?
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you just fine. Please go ahead.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation tonight for all concerned, including the councilors. I'm chair of the Transportation Committee for the Riverside Park Community Association, which is the community immediately to the west of this development, just on the west side of the Airport Parkway and the transit line. It's from the presentation tonight, it seems that our community and the points to the west of the Airport Parkway look to be out of scope of your project planning and your thinking. This is a huge project from the number of towers and developments. The eastern part of Riverside Park is within the context of a 15-minute community to your development. We get a lot of pedestrian traffic from the eastern side of Riverside Park up to Bank Street, up to Value Village, up to the Ruby Inn and the Shoppers Drug Mart. So my question is, can you clarify again the number of units? Is it 1,100 to 1,200 units, or is that the number of people you're expecting to come in? And then you haven't mentioned the number of vehicles that you expect to be involved by the residents in this complex. So how many cars are you planning for? And specifically, how many parking spots are you planning to have, both surface and especially underground? And I ask that because, as you may be aware, the transportation issues on West Walkley Road, that part of Walkley Road west of Bank Street, especially from the transit center on westward, remain very controversial for the community. There's significant plans to calm West Walkley Road from the transit station through the new exit ramp and the roundabout onward to the west. So if this project is going to bring a large number of additional vehicles onto West Walkley Road, we'd like to know your plans to take that into account and how to assess the transportation impact. And we certainly would want to have Riverside Park Community Association involved in the consultations, because inevitably your project, given the size, is going to have a negative impact both on traffic and most likely quality of life in the community. Thank you.
Terry, just to answer your question on the number of units, we're currently proposing 11 to 1,200 units. Okay. That will depend a little bit on the spectrum sizes of those units, and how many studios there are versus how many 2 and 3 bedrooms. Andrew, our traffic consultant, may be able to answer the question of how far the scope of our traffic studies reach. So I'll just turn it over to him.
Yeah, I guess the main question was you're wondering how many kind of cars we're anticipating to be on the road. So the gist of the traffic review we do with the city is primarily in the AM and the PM peak hours. So basically the highest capacity on the roadways, and when people are generally coming and going, in the highest, most frequent time, all at the same time, basically. So for this, and I'll apologize, my numbers are a little bit higher than probably what's being contemplated on the screen right now, because I was using about 1,300 units as a rough estimate to do the first check-in with the city. So we were looking at about 120 cars in and out in the morning, and about 160, 170 cars in the PM. And that's assuming about 20 to 30% car usage during those peak hours. And as I kind of mentioned when I was on the slide, that's a little bit higher of a percentage than the city targets for developments in close proximity to transit stations. So I'd say about 5 to 15% higher auto than the targets are. So we've had those a little bit inflated, but that's one of the things that we have to work through on this. I guess that hasn't kind of been mentioned, but this is just for the zoning and the OPA, the higher level, to see if this can work. These buildings will also have to go through specific studies for each one as they pop up in the various phases. So these numbers are going to be revisited multiple times through the years as each phase goes forward. So I'm just trying to project some longer range numbers here, but they're going to evolve over time as projects come along and online in the city, as well as thinking and more information comes in with the recent origin destination city with this origin destination survey the city did. That's actually going to update some of our expected travel patterns through the city. So take it with a grain of salt.
And then Terry, if I can just add a couple things. You had a question about the parking. So
right.
You've heard at the onset, I mean, the building's very conceptual. So we're, we don't have a unit mix or any of those things yet. When Doug mentioned 43 at-grade spaces, those are spaces that are going to be, like, for instance, parallel spaces along the public and the private road. They're intended to accommodate visitor parking, Ubers, delivery trucks, and parking associated with some of the retail in the podiums. There will be below-grade parking. I can tell you for now that the city would require 0.5 spaces for parking because of the proximity to transit. Some areas of the city, the ratio is higher, for instance, Stittsville or suburban communities. But here, given the proximity to the LRT and the transit services along Bank Street, that would be the city's expectation, 0.5 spaces per unit. The developer may offer a little bit more, a little bit less, like that'll get worked out through the unit mix, but generally that's what the city would require. Thanks, Terry.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much. I just wanted to actually, before we go over to Matt, to mention to folks, I know there were some people on the phone that have called in tonight. If you're wanting to speak, it's *9 to raise your hand and *9 again to lower it. And it'll be *6 to unmute if you do raise your hand and I throw to you. I forgot to mention that to our friends who have called in tonight. But yes, Matt, I see it looks like you're already unmuted, so please go ahead.
Thanks, Miles. So I'm Matt Pinder. I'm a resident of South Keys and the executive director of Better South Keys. We're a community group that's advocating for the redevelopment of the South Keys Mall into a dense, walkable community. And I just want to share that I'm really excited about this development and what it could offer for the area. I want to emphasize to those listening that this is an investment in the community. This is an investment in new public space, in new housing, and I'm honestly quite excited and thankful that this is coming to our community. I think it's going to bring a lot of good things with it. My question is, can you speak to how you see this development interacting with Bank Street? I know it's early in the process, but what do you see the ground floors looking like? Will they have a lot of animated, active retail?
I can address some of that high level, Matt. Certainly, as I mentioned earlier, grading is kind of an interesting challenge on this site. And in working through, we've done some preliminary grading analysis to look at ways that we can make sure that the kind of the Bank Street edges and at least part of the Walkley edge of this development interface at grade with Bank Street. We don't know exactly what the outlook is for Bank Street facing retail along here. But certainly what we're trying to do is to create the opportunity on the ground floor for animated uses. So whether that's, animation that's directly amenity use to the building, whether it's retail space, whether it's services to kind of the immediate community, we can't really tell you exactly what that is yet, other than to say that we're looking to design the buildings in a way that do provide that animation at the street edge and also provide a flexibility so that, as Bank Street evolves down the road, those uses can also evolve in response to that.
Great, thanks so much. I see next in my queue is Patrick Monroe. Patrick, I'm going to ask you to unmute. Go ahead.
Yeah, perfect. You should be able to hear me now, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Hi, everyone. Thanks so I'm just a interested resident, but I just want to start by thanking the council staff and all the applicants here tonight as well as a community. It's pretty cool to see everyone involved in this. It's also really cool to see maybe not, if not the fruits of our investments being picked yet, at least the fruit starting to grow. So really good signs for the future. I have a couple of comments I want to go through pretty quickly. The first of which is related to parking minimums as well. We know if people, the biggest indicator for people buying a car is going to be the number of parking spaces available and the access to alternate mobility. And we already have the alternate mobility part. So I'm wondering if there's even more potential to reduce the parking spaces as well, and therefore the traffic impacts on local communities. As well, we've seen other projects use a significant number of shared vehicles. So I don't know if that's possible for this site as well, but with 1,100 units, maybe, I don't know, 20 shared cars would get a lot of those parking spots off the books, if possible. As well, we know parking adds to both the affordability of the units and also the total cost of the project. So I think there's a lot of cases to be made for reducing that number as much as possible. And with that said, I mean, this is a bit out of scope for the project, but I do worry about all the talk of widening Airport Parkway, especially if we can reduce those peak hour congestion numbers as much as possible through transit and alternative means. So hint, hint, nudge, nudge, I guess, for councillors in the room, but I'm sure some other people may have different opinions. My second to last point is about, so the buildings are LEED certified, which I think is really awesome. I was wondering if there'd be some sort of district heating or cooling system that could be used in this property to make it as efficient as possible. And then finally, I've heard of some concepts of like community benefit, like storefronts being saved for some of the existing vendors. So maybe they come back after the construction, have like a year or two of their rent subsidized to embed back into the neighborhood. So I know it's very conceptual at this point. That's why I want to get these comments out here early on in the process. But I think this is a really exciting project overall, and I look forward to seeing it develop. Thank you.
Thank you for that feedback, Patrick. That's a lot to unpack. If there was one question you wanted an answer on tonight, could you prioritize it for us?
Sure. I guess it would be the amount of like shared parking or shared vehicles that could be accommodated at a site like this. And also I just noted there is also opportunity for maybe like a modal filter or something to reduce the cut through traffic on that private road. So those two would be my top priority.
Thanks for your comments. It's almost as if you work in the industry. So, yeah, I mean, across our entire portfolio, we have a varied cross section of modal strategies that we deploy. The key will be to work very closely with the local consultant team, and in particular, Andrew and his group, to understand what is more robust in this neighborhood and what needs to be, for lack of a better term, beefed up or improved. So too early to say today what the specific strategy is, but like the housing question, I would say there will be a very sophisticated strategy as we work through the entitlements, and most of it will be based on market need. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks for that. Yeah, other applicants in this ward, we've asked for car sharing services on site, preloaded Presto passes, bike rentals, anything to encourage folks to use those alternative modes of transit and make the property a success. So really happy to hear, Brad, that you're open to these conversations, and happy to hear that feedback as well. So I got, oh, Susan, hey, I got you next on my list. Please go ahead. I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Am I unmuted? Yeah.
You sure are.
Okay, hi. I'm the president of the Heron Park Community Association, and Linda does all of our, she's our kind of expert planner. She's been at this a lot longer than I have. But I do have some comments, and I do support what Linda has said 100%, that there are some very good things about this project that you've presented tonight, particularly the green space and the way the pedestrians are able to walk through, as well as the trying to get the buildings away from the community overlooking Glenhaven Private. Which brings me to my first point in terms of, in August of this year, Heron Park experienced a significant flooding with respect to the storm that we had in August. And although there's investigation still ongoing, the infrastructure in our community is 1960s, and it wasn't able to accommodate the intensity of the storm that hit the Ottawa area in August. And so I'm raising that from I guess, a design capacity to take that into consideration, because I don't know how that works with respect to planning, but any kind of water or water movement that's going to be coming in the direction of Heron Park is going to be problematic, because we can't actually, our infrastructure can't manage what's currently happening now. So I wanted to make that point. With respect to the height, the buildings are very, very high. And I noted in the beginning of your presentation that, you know, you wanted to have a amendment to zoning so that you can get the heights to be more in alignment with the new official plan, because the Bank Street secondary plan has much lower heights. And the banks, I guess the Bank Street secondary plan, a lot of work went into that, and it has limits associated with it for a reason, and that were very well thought out and very well developed through a lot of consultation. And so it troubles me when developers try to amend something that's currently actually has been adopted into the Ottawa official plan, and amend it to increase the height levels. And it seems to be happening throughout the city. And from a community perspective, it's problematic. Even though there are gradients associated with the plan, like the design, and those sorts of things, that it really, these kinds of developments stick out like a sore thumb, and they don't really benefit or add to the overall, I guess, the overall feel of the neighborhood. And so I'm wondering whether you can get density by having lower buildings, and sticking within the Bank Street secondary plan levels. The other point I wanted to make was with respect to mixed use. I heard that there's going to be, I guess, retail on the ground levels, and I just wanted to have that confirmed in terms of what kind of retail, because there are going to be a lot of people living here with 1,100 or 1,200 units, and it would be nice to have the type of retail going in there supported, so that people actually can just walk to downstairs to do what shopping they need to do, as opposed to have to go on Take Transit and, you know, do some other kind, like go farther afield, because we have this opportunity now to create a little hub, which would also then be very attractive to the adjacent communities, and having walking paths into those areas so that they can access the retail as well. The other point I wanted to make was with respect to the open green space. So it's lovely that you have open green space. I know we have a development at the corner of Bank and Heron that also has open green space, and it's sort of a similar design with much lower story buildings with a center kind of courtyard green space. And it's not overly used. I don't often see very many people in that space, and I canvass the community on a nightly basis with my dog. And I go to all corners of our community. And it just seems that, I guess my comment would be that there needs to be something to entice people to actually use the space. And I don't know what that could be, but I don't know whether you as a developer have done any aftermarket investigation in terms of how the spaces that you design are actually truly being used. Or is this, you put green space there and you hope that people are using it? But in my experience, I very rarely see people in the green space at Bank and Heron. So that's something for you to consider in terms of just your experience and knowledge with respect to how your other properties have functioned. The car share idea, someone raised that. I wanted to raise that again. That's a great idea with respect to having a number of cars located within this area that not only service that particular node, but people who are living adjacent that may not have cars could actually access the car share opportunities. And let me just check my notes because I was jotting things down as people were talking. I think those are, I think I've made most of the points that I've wanted to.
If you want, Susan, I can offer a few comments. Going back to your very first one, in support of the applications, I mentioned that there are a range of consultants that contribute to this. One of the obligations will be to submit what's called an adequacy of public service engineering study. So an engineering consultant will have to assess existing potable water, sanitary sewer, stormwater capacity, and even hydro and Enbridge and all the other private utilities. So as a first step, that study will be submitted to the city to assess capacity and identify upgrades as needed. I didn't mention this earlier. There is a third application that will come at a later time. That's called the site plan control application, which is a much more detailed and engineering heavy application. And that's when any required changes to infrastructure would be constructed at the applicant's cost. You're right, it is common on your second point to amend secondary plan documents, because although this one was carried over from previous versions, it was never refined or updated. So it is very much out of step with the direction and demographic projections of the city, and an acknowledgement of both provincial policies and a need for greater housing in strategic locations in proximity to transit. So it is actually not uncommon to change secondary plan documents, which are older documents, and zoning to be in link with or in step with council priority and council direction. With respect to the open space, you raised some good points in that if the entire site was developed exclusively with 16-story buildings, you wouldn't have the opportunity to do the open space. The height and the tower approach is what actually creates the opportunity for internal open space. This is an ongoing debate in planning circles. Do you go to lower profile buildings that take up the majority of the site, or do you go to point towers that allows breathability between the towers, more defined podiums, in this case, a new public road that's going to support pedestrian cut through to the transit station, and most importantly, that internal open space, which is lacking on the site. In terms of the mixed use, clearly BGO is committed to a mixed use project. They will work with both existing tenants and future tenants to find that right mix, because clearly they see the same value as you do to having a commercial component. And to be honest, most of the buildings that we deal with in applications in the city on these types of corridors are characterized by some at-grade retail. And maybe the last thing I'll say is on the Bank and Heron, recall that that intersection is not characterized with the same transit facilities that we're seeing here. We're about 220 meters to the existing transit way and about 160 meters to the future Walkley station. So that is very good proximity to transit facilities, plus Bank Street, which might be subtly different than the Heron Road application. So thank you.
Thanks for that. Thank you, Susan. The next person I see in my queue is Kenny. Kenny, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the presentation tonight. I'm here representing the owner of Ruby Inn. So my question is, what's going to happen to the existing businesses here? I don't see where they're planned out in these drawings. I know at the start of the presentation, it was said that the businesses may return, but what does that mean exactly for a small business like myself and my fellow neighboring businesses? Do we all have to close down for a few years? I would just like to know what the plan is for us and timeline if possible, because there's a lot of changes here to consider, which would affect the decision of returning or not.
Hi, Kenny. Sorry, I just got your name. It's Brad Keiko. Could you just repeat for me which business owner you are? I didn't pick that up.
Ruby.
Ruby. Okay, thank you. So it's really too early to tell who and the specifics and that sort of thing. I think part of the fact-finding exercise that we're going through right now is just to understand who might be interested, what the market will need, what the opportunities are that will present themselves. What I would recommend, Kenny, is that you reach out to the property manager on the site who can connect you with us, and we can sit down and talk with you about any and all options going forward.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Kenny.
Thanks.
Thanks, Kenny. Thanks, Brad. I see Mary Huang next. I'm going to ask you to unmute. Please go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. My apologies. My name's Mary Huang. I'm with Ottawa Community Benefits Network. I actually have probably 4 or 5 questions. I'll do it very quickly to start conversations going. First, affordable housing. I hope you would take the dream example for Dream LeBreton Flats and use the measure as MMR or median market rent, CMHC median market rent or CMHC average market rent than the RCFI definition of percentage of household income for the affordable housing component. So at least consider that. Second, accessible housing. I know the current Ontario building code is 15%. I don't know if you can consider doing universal standards or at least like the wider corridors, wider doorways, and so on, and to have a higher percent than 15%, because the seniors in Ottawa by 2035 is going to be 25% of the population, and you have the disabled community. So 15% Ontario building code for accessibility is actually a lagging indicator, in my opinion. And that's something which, having dealt with 2 aging parents, I think we're in trouble. Third, family size units. I know a lot of developers that comes to the city of Ottawa think of 2-bedroom as a family size unit. I'm sorry, they're not. I hope you will consider, maybe along the line of Montreal, a higher percentage of 3 bedrooms, because there are a lack of family size units, and they need to be in apartments too, not just single family homes, especially as we're densifying. I lived in Europe for 10 years. I have friends that had raised families in Paris, Lyon, London, etc. So fourth, as part of the Ontario Community Benefits Network, I was wondering if you would consider some local hiring or equity seeking group hiring targets. We can always start this more discussion in that area. I know for NCC has put that requirement in Dream Le Breton Flats. Just want to start the conversation. And I'm am I losing my track on the fifth? But maybe that's enough for now. But I do comment. Oh, yes, right. I do comment on the green space, but maybe just a suggestion. Maybe if you since this is on a massing study, maybe if you can get your planner or architect to look into the Barcelona superblock for a small part of your development, rather than the four towers. Just a thought. That's my five comments.
Thanks,
Sorry
Mary.
to be so long.
The applicant team, any comments in
Yeah,
response?
so thank you for all of that. Great commentary. So I'll just touch on 3 points: affordable housing, CMHC, MMR versus RCI. I think I heard that properly. Accessible housing. You were concerned with the code minimum 15% and family-sized units with a higher percentage of 3-bedroom. What we do is we do not prototype anything across the country. So we want to come into this environment and understand what the specific needs are. We do that through different means. We employ market experts, housing market experts. In some instances, we will do ECOS polls. We deploy a variety of techniques to get to what we think is a meaningful outcome. So again, way too early in the process to tell you today what the specifics are, but some component of all of this will be baked into this program going forward. Thank you for your comments.
Thanks so much, Brad. Gary Lindberg, I see you next in my queue. I'm going to ask you to unmute. Please go ahead.
Thanks very much. I have a couple of timeline questions. This has been an interesting presentation, but we seem very early in the whole process because a lot of the questions aren't being answered, and you're going to the UDRP for some preliminary comments sometime. So are you going to come back and have another 1 or 2 of these pre-consultation sessions before you start going down the line of triggering the formal, whatever it is, 120-day consultation process? Because during the 120 days, it becomes almost impossible to have a meaningful dialogue with you, and you lose out a lot. The second timeline question is, you're talking about 40 blocks, four blocks of high rises, and you're not saying anything about whether you're going to have shovels in the ground in 2 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. Are you going to build the first block and then the next one 2 years after, and then have it all complete in 8 years? Or are we looking at 18 or 28 years? So there's a lot of timeline questions. And then I'll just leave one observation that looking at 40 stories and thinking about Claridge's building overlooking Dow's Lake at 45, and hearing mentions of Lansdowne Park Phase 1, it sounds like you're really targeting the high-end rental market. And so these discussions about affordable housing don't seem to meet very well with high-end luxury rental housing. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks for those comments. I apologize. I missed your name.
Oh, he's remuted. It's Gary Lindberg is the name.
Gary. Thanks, Gary. So I'll just touch on a couple of things. So timeline, again, to be determined. You're right, it is too early in the process, but we'll be working on something concurrent with the entitlements to understand what the market absorption will be. We don't want to build empty buildings. It's a fine line. We want to try to absorb alongside the market opportunity in this neighborhood. In terms of additional public consultation, Griffin Brockman and myself have been leading this process for the majority of the time to date. There will be a few folks added into the mix as we go forward. And we at BGO are always available to talk with you, whether it's in a public forum like this or even offline. So we can, through Miles, provide you with any contact information, and we would be happy to talk with you at any time as these details start to evolve. With respect to feasibility, construction, those details. Again, happy to provide updates along the way. It's too early for that piece, unfortunately. But thank you for your commentary.
Thanks, Brad. Folks, I will say, if you do have feedback or more questions after tonight, do email us at capitalward@ottawa.ca. And thanks, Brad, for offering to continue the conversation. We can facilitate that feedback pre-application, which is the now crucial time that we need to have these conversations. So I have Pat, and I'm going to put the email address in the chat, so in case you don't have it, you can also contact us through seanmenard.ca. Pat B, I see you next. Please go ahead.
Yeah, is it coming through?
It is.
Okay, good. Yeah. Well, I just wanted sort of, it might be a simple question. Why have they really considered just building upwards at the heights in the current plan? You know, do we need these 40-story buildings, or was it 16 stories, somebody said, for the current plan? I mean, you know, I just wondered if they looked at that as an alternative to what they've been proposing. That's all. I mean, seriously considered, you know, working through with the city plan, which has been thought about, and there have been a lot of other meetings on and everything else, you know, all that over the years. So, okay.
I mean, Brad, I don't know, you want to go, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in, Miguel, and you can prop me up from a planning perspective. It's very unlikely that if the expectation is we're to deliver housing on transit, whether it be a combination of purpose-built rental and condo, all purpose-built rental, whatever the conversation ends up being based on the market needs, that the project at this scale would be feasible at those heights. I think there was some interesting observations and comments earlier in the program wherein some suggested that this sort of tower in the park scheme, Miguel, it might have been you, is always debated against the lower, more dense programs. We are firm believers that if we're going to make purpose-built rental feasible, that you have to get into the taller, repeatable forms, because there are efficiencies to be realized to deliver what is a very difficult product to deliver in this particular market. So I appreciate the comments. I would just add a note, and this would probably be a good segue over to Miguel as well. With transit coming, with the increased infrastructure, the focus on the increased infrastructure in the Bank Street EA work with the multimodal split, I think it's very important for us to understand that this neighborhood is going to look and operate in a very different way with the benefit of all of that infrastructure being deployed and coming online. So, Miguel, with that, I'll leave it at that, and I'll turn it over to you for comments.
Thanks, Brad. Yeah, I think, and I understand that, you know, the heights expressed in the new official plan can be a little jarring, and that these corridors are intended to function and look very differently. You know, I've made this comment before that these older policy documents, although they have value, like for instance, they gave us direction on design features and podiums and new public roads and open space, are out of step with the direction from council and the direction from the province related to strategic sites that are in very good proximity to transit. And this would be an opportunity lost, because, you know, if you look at the distribution of densities near this transit station, it's actually quite weak, with the exception of this property and a few other opportunities to contribute to ridership. The city sets those modal splits quite high on purpose because they're trying to encourage ridership, and that sometimes, and most times, density translates into building heights. But, you know, council has already provided direction that building heights along these corridors in these areas should be higher to support transit investments, to support the retail along those corridors, to strengthen the retail, to strengthen the library branches, to strengthen the community centers and the hockey rinks. Density translates into a stronger, more walkable community. The city's already putting in significant investments along Bank Street to support that density. You know, these applications are very much in sync with what the province and the city are expecting out of these nodes and corridors. Thank you.
Thanks, Miguel. Just on a point of clarity, I don't want to take away from the merit of the argument you're making, Miguel, but This would be an official plan amendment, I believe, if it were to come forward, because we are with the secondary plan here that was
Just
renewed
to the
as part of the new
secondary
OP.
plan. The
Right.
parent OP supports 40 stories.
Granted, I just wanted to be clear on that.
Yep, we are
looking at an official. People shouldn't be surprised if they see an official plan amendment here.
No, and actually, you know, the Riverside applications that I referenced very early on also had an official plan amendment.
That's right.
It's very common to have to bring these documents and the zoning in sync with merging council direction. So thank you.
Great, thanks for clarifying. Look, I have Lucas next. I'm going to ask you to unmute. Please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Sounds good. I think I have like two questions at this moment. First thing is that I realized, I guess, from the presentation about the very minimal parking spots below grade, I guess, for residential, and I understand, and that's purely understandable with the encouragement and like the way of the future of utilizing the LRT that's very close by, and but I would strongly encourage, like, if at all possible, about having, if like, because I think right now you're proposing like 49, 46 or something like that parking spots underground, and I'm thinking, like, is that, as much as that's part of the policy of like, and maybe if making it more affordable with the units in the building, because it's expensive to build underground, but it's is it having like a quarter of the total units, like of the like over 1,000, like a quarter parking spots at least, or like it's a little bit more reasonable than just 40, than everyone else having to rely on like public transit, or I know the car sharing is I guess a good way of how doing it, but like relying on people on car share if they don't want to have their own vehicle or some of that, but if that's expectation, but it's that's what I would like, if that's reasonable to ask. The next thing is, in that optional, like in the presentation, it said, if I remember, they're having like amenity building next to, I guess, the green space. I don't know how is it going to be, if there's any amenity space inside of the any of those current buildings that you're proposing to build in total, or there would be all the amenity space in that potential extra separate building, low-rise building. So it's I think that's, if that's optional, I would really encourage, because that's over 1,000 units in total. So I think people need to, if there's, it can be like a pool and a gym, and to have make sure that people have amenity space, or activity rooms and stuff like that. So and just one, if I may, just quickly, I don't think I saw like a in the presentation of the shadow study, but is anticipate the shadows from all these buildings be pretty, anything big impact on the existing residential and the next door to this property? And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Lucas.
Lucas, thanks for your feedback. I'll jump on the first two, and then I'll defer to the architect to comment with respect to the shadows. Parking, it's really up to us to maneuver and understand that fine line, and Lucas, get it right? Because if the parking is wrong in context of this market, we won't be able to lease it, we'll cause issues on site. So I would applaud the group participating tonight for focusing on parking, and I'm going to double down and just say that in consultation with the consultant team and Andrew, we will pay very, very close attention to it to strive to get it right. So thank you for that feedback. In terms of the amenities, each building will come with a certain percentage or component of amenity, and then the mix within that building could be similar in some buildings, could be different. I think the idea might be that across the 4 or 5 buildings that ultimately get developed, however this plan is proposed today or could potentially change, that there is some form of variety of both amenity housed within the building itself and amenity housed within the open space. So there will be some amenities, again, too early, but we have an amazing track record for paying very close attention to that. And just finally, maybe I could ask Hoban's team to comment with respect to the shadows.
Thanks, Brad. Yeah, I can jump in on that. So as part of the rezoning application, there's 3 environmental aspects that we will look at in terms of sets of studies. One of those is the sun shadow studies. There's also a study required for wind impacts resulting from development, and there's one for noise, both to and from the buildings. I'm going to talk about the shadow one because I'm not the consultant for the other 2. The shadows, we, in development of the locations or the placement of the buildings on the site, we're trying to achieve a few different things with respects to shadow. Minimize the impact on the adjacent residential to the west. So we've pushed our taller buildings closer to Bank Street. Secondly, we're trying to create a priority for daylight to that new open space focused later in the afternoon. So again, pushing the open space to the west property line, which helps on the first aspect I was talking about, also gives that better daylight access or sunlight access really from hours of about 1 o'clock on, and kind of prioritizes giving full daylight into it later in the day, particularly, in the period from March through till September. And so those shadow studies, we're developing them. We've done preliminaries on them right now. And we'll have more detailed ones that look at the existing shadow conditions, shadow impacts, and the net shadow change that will be part of the formal application.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting this meeting.
Thanks, Lucas. I see Marco next. Marco, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute. Please go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I just want to say, appreciate seeing this kind of dense development around the city. It's awesome for, transit and making our city more walkable and friendly. Obviously, as some others have mentioned about the parking, I see that quite a bit of it is going to be underground, which is the most costly type of parking to provide, obviously. I joined a bit late on the meeting, so I don't know if I missed it, but have you guys considered how much, providing all of this underground parking will impact rents, and what kind of differences you would see in, let's say, if you slash this parking, and for instance, how it would affect the possible rents you'll be charging the people that will be living here?
Marco, great observation. Thank you for your comments. So just one piece that we haven't spoken about, but I'll talk about it for a second. We're doing a very detailed due diligence to understand, Marco, what's going on in the subterranean realm. So geotechnical, environmental, hydrogeological, rock profiles, water profiles, all of that good stuff. Early indications are that there's a very shallow rock table here, and so we are going to be pinched from a parking realm perspective, a realm that is feasible and cost effective. So we're navigating a bunch of challenges. That due diligence is underway today. It is not yet complete. I suspect that 3 or 4 months from now, we'll have the complete profile, and we'll be able to come back to you with a proper rationale for why we're positioning parking where we are throughout the development. I would just like to focus on your comment. It is not our intention to overpark to the point where the affordable and the attainable component are no longer feasible. Again, it is our intent to park hitting the mark. And so again, I take that away, and we will focus on it as a very important piece of this program going forward.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks, Marco. I'm going to go to Simon next, as I don't think we've heard from Simon yet, and then I'll go to you, Susan. And I think that's probably all the time we have for tonight, as we're inching pretty darn close to 9 p.m. So folks, if you haven't spoken or something comes up again, please do email us, and we can pass along that feedback and get answers to lingering questions. Simon, please go ahead. I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Oh, hi. Thank you very much for taking my question. I'll keep it quick since I see we're almost at time. Yeah, I'm really excited to see this type of urban infill in the city. And I think someone touched on it, but I just want to reiterate this. But given, the proximity to the mass transit line and, location is great, could we see something like a transit pass being offered to renters for like the first year or two? And could the city potentially provide this like at a bulk or discounted rate to help incentivize this? We've seen other developments do this across North America. I know Cul-de-sac, I think in Arizona, does it for like permanently, but I'd love to hear if that's something that was considered. Thank you.
Hi, Simon. Thanks for your feedback. So just with respect to the multimodal split, the transit program, we have looked at those options in other jurisdictions. And again, it might inform part of the multimodal split or optionality here. It's just too early to say. I would just say that we have done it elsewhere in the past. So it is on the list of items that could potentially go into the mix from a transportation perspective.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Simon. And you don't have to go as far as Arizona to find that arrangement. We've worked with applicants to provide preloaded Presto cards to new tenants for the first year in other sites in our ward. Thank you for that point, though. It's a good one. Susan,
Yeah.
we're gonna end with you, so please go ahead.
Two very quick comments. I really liked what Lucas said, and so I just wanted to reiterate with respect to parking, our experience within the community has been that if parking isn't provided adequately, then people still have cars and they park on the adjacent city streets, which then gives in our community problems, especially in the winter, with respect to emergency vehicles, city large vehicles like garbage trucks, buses, ambulances, fire trucks, not being able to pass through. And so we've seen this at Bank and Heron, and we've seen this with some very, very small infills that have come into our community. So I'm happy to see that you're taking parking very seriously and going to really look into that, because it does have, if you don't get it right, it does have a detrimental effect on the neighboring community. And from a space perspective, Lucas mentioned something about amenity space. And I just wanted to reiterate that I think with what we've seen in the past with respect to the pandemic and the changing of work habits with respect to people working at home, and looking at this particular site and around to see what actually would be an open space or opportunity to get out of say a bachelor apartment or a one-bedroom apartment, and where would you go? Should we be faced with similar challenges in the future? And so intensity is wonderful, but I think we also have to provide supporting infrastructure around, so that so that we're not isolated in our one-bedroom or bachelor apartments, and we have space in order to actually live well, not just survive. And so that, I think that's where we're coming at from a community association in terms of looking at these kinds of developments, that I try to put myself in one of these units, and I try to put my mother in one of these units, or my daughter in one of these units, and what kind of life would they have, and not only in the actual compound itself, but in the what we call the 15-minute community. And although we're trying to build 15-minute communities, it's been a challenge to really succeed at that. So I offer that out as comments based on what Lucas has said, because he just reminded me of how important it is, quality of life is, and how easily things such as amenity space and parking affect that. So that's all I have to say, and I just want to thank you on behalf of the Community Association for giving your presentation tonight and taking all our questions and comments seriously, and we look forward to seeing this evolve and what you'll come up with respect to more details. So thank you very much.
Yeah, Susan, thank you very much for that feedback. It's caused me to think there are two important points that I just wanted to leave with the group, so it's kind of a great way to end the night. Number one, BGO is not a merchant builder. And for those on the phone who don't understand what that is, it's a builder who comes in and invests in the program day one, but once the condos are sold, they're out of the picture. We are a long-term investor. So we are a vertically integrated company. And by that, I mean we develop, we manage, we lease in perpetuity. So the goal is to feed the funds pipeline and to be a neighbor of yours in the community for 20, 30, 40 years down the road. So we are invested from the perspective of wanting to make sure that we get the parking right, that the amenities are right, because it's not us building the project, Susan, and selling out and have nothing to do with it. We have to build the project and come back and lease it month over month over month over month over the duration. So it has to be appealable in perpetuity. We have an amazing list of amenities across the country, and I'd be happy to sit down with you in the resident association and understand, what, if anything, you think is an immediate need in this neighborhood. We're here to gain feedback. So if you think there's something specific, we're here to hear you out and to work across the market to find a way to get it right. Last comment, not related to Susan's comments, but I just wanted to reiterate this going forward. I've been doing this for 30 years. I have a very forward-facing philosophy. So I just wanted to reiterate for those that joined late, if there are any comments or any meetings that are required of the associations that are participating tonight or the public, you can reach out through Miles. You can obtain our contact information, and we will continue to be forward-facing and address any questions, comments, or concerns going forward. And last comment, I just wanted to thank everybody for a very engaged dialogue, for a packed house. I think we were up to over 70 at some point. We're down to 55.
Over 80.
Over 80, amazing. Thank you. I lost track. So we are very, very keen to understand that if we are appointing investment dollars toward this opportunity, that we are working alongside the community is engaged, and that we are doing the right thing. So thank you, everybody, for your participation.
Thanks so much, Brad. Thank you to everyone who came out tonight. Thank you to the other councillors' offices, the Community Association reps. Ottawa Community Benefits Network had a representative here as well tonight, so thank you for being here. Thanks for the productive conversation tonight, folks. And again, please do email us any feedback you have that you feel wasn't spoken to tonight, any questions that come up, just reach out. It's capitalward@ottawa.ca. I put it in the chat. seanmenard.ca is our website. You can also reach us through there. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great night. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.